Welcome back to Math with Miss Swartz. Today we're moving on from our one-step equations and we're going to jump into two-step equations. So we're going to be adding a step to our whole process. We're also going to talk about, as we have listed here, the distributive property. The distributive property you've probably seen before. We're going to use that within equations. And we're going to talk about how it works and then how to solve equations with the distributive property present. So, hopefully you have your notebook out ready to go. We're going to jump right in. We're going to just start with this key idea here. This doesn't have a lot to it. It actually calls it a multi-step because there's going to be more days that we're working with equations that take more than one step, so multi-step. But it says to solve them, we're going to use inverse operations to isolate the variable. And one thing I want you to add when you write this down is that we need to work in reverse order as we do for PEMDAS. So the order of operations tell us that we do parentheses, exponents, multiplying, dividing, addition, subtraction. For solving equations, we're actually going to work backwards. Okay, so we're working in the other direction. So we will add and subtract before we multiply and divide. We're going to multiply and divide before we would work with any exponents, which we won't see a lot of. But we will take care of a lot of parentheses. We're going to talk a little bit about that in distributive property, so you won't actually be working with a lot of either of these. But as you can see, addition and subtraction is going to come before multiplication and division, which is important to understand. So let's look at some examples. Number one here, we have negative 2n plus 3 equals 9. And we talked about before, our goal, and you can rewrite it if you want to, our main goal is to get the variable alone. That is our main goal. So I'm always asking myself, how do I get this alone? Well, I want to use my inverse operations. That was something else we talked about in the last video. But I need to decide what I want to work with first. Okay, so I have a negative 2 and I have a 3 that are causing me not to have my n alone. And I want to work in reverse order of operation, or another way I've heard of it talked about is I want to work with the thing that's least attached to the variable, so furthest from the variable. So this negative 2 is right next to n, so I'm going to work with this 3 first. I'm going to work with addition and subtraction before I do multiplication and division. So if I'm adding 3, to get rid of that, I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. So I have negative 2n is equal to 6. Now, my variable is still not alone. If I'm still working to get that alone, now I'm multiplying. I have multiplication left. So obviously I need to use the inverse of multiplication, which is division, and divide by negative 2. Some of us had some issues with that earlier this week. If we have a negative 2, we want to divide by exactly what is there. So it's just n left, and 6 divided by negative 2 is negative 3. Now I can plug this back in to check it, but this is what I think my answer is. So negative 2 times negative 3 plus 3 should equal 9. Negative 2 times negative 3, so they agree, so they're going to be positive. 6 plus 3 is 9, so I know that this is right. Okay, if we look at number 2 here, number 2 is similar to a problem that we did on our homework, number 3 on our homework that I showed each class. So here, if we want to get n alone, we would need to subtract 14 because I have a positive 14 there. But what's left, if I do keep change, is a negative n, and then I would have 16 left on this side. Well, I wasn't looking for a negative n here. I have to find a way to get rid of that. And we talked about how any variable has a pretend 1 in front of it. We don't write it because 1 times that variable is just the variable. But when there's a negative number, we can say that's a negative 1 because there's a 1 in front of it, and then we can divide by negative 1, so n would give us negative 16. If you see that you have negative n, you could just understand, well then your answer is just going to be the opposite of whatever negative n is. It's going to be the opposite. So in this case, it'll be negative 16. So if we check this, 14 minus negative 16 equals 30. We'll keep change. 30 equals 30. I know that's right. All right, we'll continue on here. There's a few more examples. I'll do one more with you, and then you can try one on your own, or two, I guess. They're on this page. So on this first one, we have multiplication here, and we have addition here. So I want to work in reverse order of operation. I'm going to subtract first on both sides. So I have negative 3z equals 6. And now I can divide to get z by itself. 6 divided by negative 3 would be negative 2. And you could plug that in to check it. Negative 3 times negative 2 plus 1 should equal 7. 6 plus 1 equals 7. 7 equals 7. So I know it's right. So I want you to try 2 and 3 on your own. If you have questions, raise your hand. So now would be a good time to pause. Alright, so one more topic that we're going to talk about today is the distributive property. So this would be good to write down. The distributive property is to multiply a sum or difference by a number. And you're going to multiply each number in the sum or difference by the number outside of the parentheses. So it gives you some examples. But what I want you to think about is this first piece right here. Okay, so 3 times 9 plus 2. If you actually saw this problem and you weren't thinking about the distributive property, you might not do what they did over here. You might say, well, I need to work on parentheses first. 9 plus 2 is 11. So 3 times 11 is 33. Well, I want to show you that you're going to get the same answer whether you do it this way or you use the distributive property. So here what they did was they multiplied each piece inside the parentheses by the piece on the outside. 3 times 9 is 27, and then 3 times 2 is 6. If you add those together, you get 33. So whether you do it this way or this way, it doesn't matter, you're going to get the same answer. So what it's saying, the distributive property, when we have variables, it allows us to multiply that outside piece by our inside pieces because we can't add the inside pieces, b and c, if we don't know what they are. So what we can do is we can take a times b plus a times c, and we can add those pieces together, and then we are able to solve more effectively when we have variables. So it works the same for this one with when we have subtraction. 9 minus 2, well, this would be 3 times 7, which would give us 21. Here we just distributed into each piece. 3 times 9 is, I'm drawing a blank here, 3 times 9 is, sorry about that, 27, goodness, minus 3 times 2, when we bring it in, is 6. 27 minus 6 does in fact equal 21. So as you can see, we can use the distributive property when we have variables to help us simplify problems. So let's look at an example with the distributive property. So the first one on here, we have 8 times the quantity, because it's in parentheses, q minus 11, and that equals negative 16. So right now, there's not a lot I can do without this being a little more simplified. Since I can't subtract inside my parentheses, I'm going to have to distribute. So I'm going to take the 8 and I'm going to multiply it by the q, and I'm going to take the 8 and I'm going to multiply it by that negative 11, essentially, is what we have. So we have 8q minus 88 equals, so I did 8 times q and then 8 times 11, negative 16. From here, now I should be able to solve this problem like I have any problem that I did previously in the video. So I'm going to work with my addition and subtraction first. I'm going to add 88. So I have 8q equals So I have different signs, so I'm going to have to subtract. 88 minus 16 is positive 72. And then I'll divide by 8 on both sides to get Q by itself. So Q would equal 9. I can always check this. So 8 times 9 minus 11 equals negative 16. So 8 times negative 2 should give us negative 16, which it does. So I want you to try number 2 on your own. Once you're done with number 2, you can have someone check your notes, and then you can get your homework. Have a wonderful day. If you have questions, stop by and see me.